Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Hey everyone, I'm here with Karen. This is Tess. We're excited to bring another episode of Behind the Book to you. Today we have Elizabeth Bromke, who was so much fun, and we got to hear about her writing journey, an incredible journey of as far as the speed of it. I was shocked about how many books she had written in such a short amount of time, and didn't just her success hitting the USA Today. I was amazed, and she's very impressive.
Especially because she has a small child at home. She was picking up her kindergartner the very afternoon that we taped our interview, which I wasn't doing much of anything when I had a kindergartner. So I give her huge credit for that.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, what's going on with you? Anything interesting?
Well, I am reading this really awesome book, The Scholar by Tess Thompson. I'm holding it up, but obviously our listeners can't see it. It has an incredible cover. My sister actually commented on the cover when I posted about it on Facebook. And I'm like, Tess has the best covers. And I had this thought that we should invite your cover designer on the show one of these days, because I would love to hear how a designer comes up with the images, and whoever did this one did it perfectly.
Yeah, and I use Elizabeth Mackey for those listening who are interested, and she's incredible. She does a lot of other covers for way bigger authors than I am, but she is, I'm hoping we can get her on this year. She's busy right now because it's summertime and she has little kids, but she's a wonderful person, and we'll have lots of interesting things to share with us, I'm sure. For one, she lives in Alaska, so we have to ask her about that. But
right there. That's interesting right there. But to get back to your book, it's called The Scholar. And what I loved about it, besides I was really engrossed in the story, is it's told in first person, which I don't always love. But in this particular book, it really works.
Well, that's nice.
You're not only a friend, you're also one of my favorite authors.
Well, same. That's true for your work and me. I love all your books. It's been really fun to see this series take off. The first is The Schoolmistress, and then The Spinster, and then this new one's The Scholar. And the premise is, it's kind of a family saga mixed with some romance. The first book is about Quinn and Alexander, who is a widower with 5 children. And Quinn comes out to this little frontier town to become the first teacher. And they fall in love and get married in the first book. And then each of the subsequent books will be the siblings. And it started with Josephine, the oldest sister. And then this is Theo's book. And I just, I wrote the first one. I had a dream about it and wrote down kind of the details in my notebook. And then 2 years later, I finally had a chance to write it. And it was kind of just sort of going to be a Christmas present to myself. I'd finished the Cliffside Bay books, which took forever. And I was like, I'm just going to write this book. I want to. But it's been very well received, and they're doing well. So I'm excited about that. I have it on pre-order for May, but I actually have been able to rearrange some things, and I'm going to have it out by the end of the year. I'm not a total plotter, as you know, but I have it pretty much plotted out, and I'm super excited to start that one.
Well, that makes me happy. I won't have to wait as long.
That's right. Anyway, well, that's pretty much it. We don't have that many exciting tales this week for our listeners, so we'll just get right to the interview. Hey, everybody. I'm here with Karen, and this is an episode of Behind the Book. We have Elizabeth Bromke with us today. She writes women's fiction and small-town romance, yay. Across all of her books, you'll find nostalgia for a bygone era, family values, heartwarming romance, mystery, and strong female friendships. Bromke's fictional settings include charming towns with quirky casts of locals. A Tucson native, Elizabeth always longed for seasons. So after meeting her husband on Match.com, the pair settled a little farther north in the mountains, where they have 1 son and 2 golden retrievers, Winnie and Tuesday. I love that. Elizabeth enjoys good books, puzzles, movies, and long walks. She loves to spend time at home with her family. Welcome, Elizabeth. So tell us a little bit about how you became a novelist and which of your titles was your first published book.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. And let's see. So I was an English teacher for 13 years, and during the course of that, and even previously to it, I'd always written for fun. And then about 3 years ago, I just sort of on a whim decided to write a book, and then I fell down the rabbit hole of looking to see what the next steps could be for me, and I ended up at that point self-publishing that book, which was titled Christmas on Maplewood Mountain. I fell in love with it, the whole process from start to finish. It just kind of became a compulsion. And so since 2018, I've written over 20 books. I'm not sure how many I have right now, probably around 25.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is
You know,
amazing.
I checked out your books in preparation for this interview, and I couldn't help but notice that a lot of your books have the word house in the title, and they have really heartwarming images of homes and houses. Is that deliberate? And is that a concept that comes up a lot in your fiction?
Absolutely. I'm glad you noticed it because it is important to the story, my stories. And to me, I love the idea of, growing up, my favorite movie was The Wizard of Oz, and I just loved the theme that there was no place like home. And so even though she drifted off into this crazy dream world, coming back home was her end goal. And you would think that I had some sort of trauma, maybe related to not having a house or something, but I've been very fortunate to have a stable home life. And I guess I've appreciated that. And I find a lot of joy in taking care of my home and spending time in my home. And while certainly I like to travel, and my characters like to travel and experience the world, it always comes back to being happy with what you have, and that goes back to the home. That's kind of how I see it, I guess.
With several novels being released each year, which it sounds like it's more than a several, how do you stay disciplined and balance work and family time?
That's a great question. It was hard for the first couple years of when I was writing, and I was writing about a book a month. I just really wasn't getting any sleep. So there was no real balance. It didn't feel like I was doing everything during the day that had to get done, and then I just stayed up late and got up early to write. But in the last I was lucky to get to leave my teaching career and write full time as of May. And since then, it feels like I feel reborn. I'm doing all the things I love to do again. And I still get up early and write at about 4:30 because it's such a quiet, peaceful time. But now I have a clearer schedule where I can give the day to my son and the dogs and myself, and then maybe work in a little writing. And so balance has it's taken me a while to get to that point, I would say.
A book a month. I am in awe. That's incredible. Did you feel compelled to write these stories, or was it that you wanted to take them to market because readers were waiting, or was it both?
Right. When I began, I read up on the rapid release strategy. And with Sweet Romance, what I was doing with my first series, Maplewood, and then even my second series, Hickory Grove, I really wanted to satisfy a demand for my audience. And yet it never felt, I still, even now, I'm writing a book a month. I'm just not releasing. Now I'm just way ahead. Whereas I was kind of working on a month to month. So I just love to write. I write fast. It's a stress reliever for me. And so I guess both.
So then when you write in series, are they more connected stories? Could they be read as a standalone?
Most of my series are interconnected. So the great example of that is Birch Harbor, which is one of my more popular series. It's women's fiction, and it's a saga. Some reader called it a soap opera at one point, and I clung to that term because that and my current series, Harbor Hills, that they're both, you have to start at book one, and then you have to read the whole set in order to get the full story. So that's not true of Hickory Grove, which is my Sweet Romance series. They're standalones, but I would say my two more dominant series are interconnected very closely.
And then how do you keep track of all the details?
I have an amazing developmental editor who will create for me a series Bible for each series, and then she'll add in each book or each storyline. And it's critical to my process because I'm not a planner at all. And even when I try to plan, I diverge from the plan, and it's never part of how I work. I never like to have kind of this pat little, all right, let me refer to an outline. Instead, I just go for it. And so most of it's just, I guess, living in my head. And where I get it wrong, I'm very fortunate to have Elise Griffin. She's fabulous. Fix it for me, or show me what I need to fix, rather.
If somebody's unfamiliar with your books, which one would you suggest they start with?
That's a great question. It's one I hear sometimes, and I always kind of put it back onto the reader. What do you like to read? And if you're a sweet romance fan, then it would be Hickory Grove would be your safe bet. So Hickory Grove is my series. I set it in a little farm town outside of Louisville, Kentucky. It's based on my family's farm there. The town itself is actually coincidentally called Elizabeth. And it's pure romance. You get the hero and heroine perspective in each book. They're quick reads, very heartwarming, very Hallmark. It's very popular, and it's a joy to write. And I'm continuing on with that series now. And then I would say if you're less a romance fan and if you prefer women's fiction with a bit of mystery, then my current series, which is Harbor Hills, the first book in it, and I've really enjoyed writing this series. So yeah, Harbor Hills or Hickory Grove.
You had mentioned that earlier before we started the interview that you had a book out not too long ago. Which series is that one in?
That's right. That's Harbor Hills. So I just released at the end of July The House Around the Corner, which is this gorgeous little fall kind of, and it's got this cover with this little red house and a leaf-strewn front lawn, and then there's a for sale sign in front of the house. And it is book 3 in Harbor Hills. And it continues the saga of the women of Apple Hill Lane. Some of my readers have sort of likened it to Desperate Housewives. One reader said it reminded her a lot of Peyton Place. I am actually, I was never familiar with Peyton Place. Have you either of you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I've not seen it. No.
Only because my mother used to talk about it.
Okay.
It's a generation even before Karen and me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a soap opera. And it was kind of, I've only read about it. I still haven't watched it, but I've read a lot about it. And I agreed with that reader. I thought, oh yeah, this is kind of a modern day, maybe a little more a little sweeter than Peyton Place, if I'm getting it right. But anyway, that's right. That's Harbor Hills.
So what parts of writing fiction are the easiest for you? And what is the hardest?
Okay, well, I like to create realistic characters with really deep backstories and well-developed big families. I think that my characters, and this comes from my childhood because I liked to write books when I was a little girl, and mainly the books were just kind of family histories. There was no plot. It was just how everyone was related. I was always fascinated with, I had make-believe sisters. I only have a brother, and I always wanted sisters. And so I love the idea of these big families and how they can be really dysfunctional. And I like to unpack that. And I've started talking, and I totally forgot what your question was.
Oh, what
I'm
parts
sorry.
of writing fiction are that's okay? Which part are the easiest and which are the hardest?
Characters, I get lost in characters. I mean, I just think about my characters. They are different parts of me. The hardest part is keeping track of little details or minutia from the world, or maybe even the timeline. One thing that my mom always makes fun of, when I wrote my first book, Christmas on Maple, I shouldn't even tell you the title of it. No one read this book, please, whatever you do. But I just have such a poor sense of numbers and directions and no real logic. I'm not a logical person whatsoever. And it was so apparent in that story. And in one of the first drafts, which my mom had read for me, the characters were the hero and heroine were out on a walk in the woods, and they got lost. But I had previously referred to the property as being only a 1 acre property. And my mom has teased me about that to this day, saying you cannot get lost on 1 acre of land, Sarah. So after that, she says she was traumatized. My mom hasn't even read all my books because she was so traumatized by my poor. And then I would have things like the characters were driving to Phoenix, which from where I am is like a 4-hour drive. But then later it would be 10. Just numbers really elude me. So that's where I struggle.
Funny because that's completely my Achilles heel too. Almost every time my editor will write back, she's like, okay, the timeline's messed up with this, and this baby couldn't be this age, that sort of thing. And the last one I got back, she's like, there were no timeline issues. And I was thinking to myself, oh no, either she's off her game or there's some anomaly that.
That's great. Thank you. I'm glad I'm not alone in that, because for a while there I thought I can't write books if I can't do math, I guess.
Exactly.
I think that's probably a common thing, because I've encountered that too. And I had a book where it was every other chapter from the point of view of a different person.
Mhm.
And my editor said, he got ahead of her timeline. It's when, it's like the end of the week for him. And I was like, none of my other early readers noticed. It's that kind of arduous stuff that's
Yes.
not my favorite part
Yes.
of being a writer.
I agree. I totally agree. Oh, it's rough. But everything else, I love. Yeah, it's just that any numbers or timeline issues, and it's because I'm not a planner. It's because I'm not keeping any track anywhere. So, and I've tried to, and I just can't do it. And I hate to even admit that, but I'm an artist. That's how I look at it.
Well, I'm curious about something. So you were an English teacher. I'm assuming you taught English literature. Is that correct?
Yep, literature and language and composition. Yep, all three of the tenets.
So you probably had in the curriculum these classics, right? Did that ever intimidate you? Because I also studied literature and drama specifically, but I remember thinking, I can't do anything this good. Like I'm never going to be that talented. So it kept me from doing it for a long time. Did that ever occur to you, or did you just have a lot more self-confidence than I do?
I do not have self-confidence. That's certainly, but I didn't struggle with it for a different reason. I think I myself have enjoyed, I can see and read from different genres and derive pleasure from a lot of different things. And so I've just looked at my writing as I'm not maybe writing anything that's literary or that will turn into a classic one day. I'm writing hopefully what is just a good story, something that people will like to read. And so I've never really looked at it, I guess, from that perspective, but now, gosh, I don't know. No,
Thanks a lot, Tess.
I know. No, but actually your answer is exactly where I got to in my mind, was like, there's all sorts of books. There's all sorts of readers, and I have these sweet stories to tell, and there's nothing wrong with that. So
no, there's not.
Totally agree.
There's not. And I actually don't even enjoy a lot of classics. And working with teenagers, maybe I see that, this isn't even really a popular, and not that I care. It's not that I care to be popular. It's just that I care to do this for a living, and I care that people like what I'm writing. And I don't think it goes back to maybe these incredible volumes of really deep enchanting, I don't know, whatever. But I do get your question, and I oftentimes wonder if even the light stories or the fun stories that I'm writing, are they good enough? Yeah.
Yeah, that self-doubt creeps in quite a bit for me. For most authors, I think. Now that you've written so many books, do you have advice for someone just starting out?
Yes. And this was advice given to me that I did not follow. So I'm not sure how powerful it will come across, but I've heard, and this is true in teaching, this was you always want to start where you mean to go, or start with the end in mind. And when I began, I didn't quite know how well I could tell a story. And so I started with sweet romance, and admittedly, I'm not a sweet romance reader. And so I do love Hallmark romance, and I do love romantic comedies, but I don't read a lot of sweet romance. And so I started writing romance because I felt like, okay, I know how a romance works. I know I watch these movies, but actually, I knew that what I wanted to write was something that really was more women's fiction or romantic women's fiction that straddled that line. And I don't regret starting with Maplewood, certainly, because I learned a lot. But if I had it to do again, I think I would trust myself to just jump into what it was I knew that I was going to do in the long run, rather than with a warm-up series, if that makes sense. So I guess my advice would be, if you want to write thrillers, start out by writing thrillers, because you're not going to get the practice if you're writing romance. And that applies to a lot of various, since I self-publish and I'm in control of a lot of moving parts, there's a lot more than just the writing that I would say that that's true of. Think about how you want this to look in 5 years, and that's where you ought to start.
That's great advice. Yeah, we have not heard that answer, actually. That's
Cool.
wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, I
Thank
like
you.
that.
Do you have any craft books that you would recommend to aspiring writers?
My favorite, and I don't think it's not for everyone, but is Stephen King's On Writing. I think after reading that book was when I made the jump from romance to women's fiction, which says it all, because I really, really wanted to write women's fiction. And that kind of gave me the confidence to switch out of what I thought was maybe a comfort zone. And it wasn't, in fact. So yeah, On Writing.
We had talked about having doubts as you're writing. When you're done with a book and it's finished and it's going to your editor or to early readers, do you still have doubts, or by that point, do you feel usually pretty good about the story?
By the time I'm finished and it's with my editor, I'm writing the next book. But then the day that I send it to my review team and the day that I upload it everywhere, then I'm like, oh, I've made a huge mistake. I don't know what it is yet, but I made a huge mistake. And I just am waiting for those first couple reviews to see what is it that I did wrong. I'm just waiting for something to have been really wrong, like my character's getting lost on an acre again, or I don't know, something way worse than that even. And I had that actually with one of my series, Gulls Landing. The first book in that series, The Summer Society, is my first book to hit the USA Today bestseller list, but it was very different than what I had previously been writing. And so my audience was a little cooler towards it. The people who have my fans were a little cooler towards it. And so that fear sort of came true when at first readers were like, I don't know about the main character, she read tarot cards, and that kind of missed the mark with my audience. And I felt really worried and really nervous about that. But then once I got the series rolling, it found its way. It brought in new readers. And in fact, the second book in that series, which is called The Garden Guild, is a reader favorite. And so I think I just had to trust that, okay, it's different. It's not perfect. It's not maybe even perfect for my readers, but there is something here, and I saw it through, and it worked out. And people love The Garden Guild. It's kind of like a hidden gem in my canon, I guess you could say.
How do you know when a book is done?
I typically have a word count goal to help me hit those 3 acts that we sort of talk about as writers. And I break down so for my romance, it's 40K, and women's fiction, 50K. And once I move past the 30K mark, I'll go back to the beginning and kind of go through, and I'll see, okay, what beats have I hit, missed, what questions are left? And then since I write in these open-ended books within series, I decide, what am I going to still not answer? And once everything else except for that one question is answered, I know it's done.
Do you have an ideal reader in mind as you're writing?
I've heard about that, and I know I should. And I do have a couple of gals on my review team who I'm thinking about. I try to, right now, for example, I'm writing something different. I'm writing a domestic thriller, and for that one, I am my ideal reader because that's what I love to read most. But for my women's fiction and romance, I don't necessarily. I just try to tell the story that I have in mind. And I know that that's probably not a good answer, but it's the truth.
All truths are good answers.
Okay.
All right. You mentioned your mom. Do you have other family members who read your books?
My mother-in-law, Sissy, and her sisters, Lisa and Vicky, are probably my biggest fans, my biggest readers. They read everything. They buy several copies and pass out all my books. So I am really, really lucky to have these fabulous in-laws. And the same I can say for my stepmother-in-law, Kathy. and my aunt on my husband's aunt on the other side, they're all incredibly supportive. They buy and read all my books. My own family is also supportive, but they aren't as voracious of readers. They say they cannot keep up with my publishing schedule, and I believe them, actually. But that's okay. I let them slide because they are my family. I love them very much.
Tess, isn't your mother-in-law like a huge fan of yours? Didn't you once say?
Yes. Well, and I'm like Elizabeth, I have two mother-in-laws. My husband has a stepmother too, and they have
Oh,
both been great fans. Yes, and very
oh,
supportive. Yeah, very, very sweet.
that's awesome.
Cliff's mom intimidates me a little bit because she reads like really literary fiction. Like she
Oh,
reads
gosh.
really good books. And so I always feel nervous when she reads one of mine, but so far she seems
Oh,
to like them okay.
oh, wow. That is intimidating. Every important person in my family, one of my books has something that's kind of about them or dedicated to them. But for my mother's-in-law, for Sissy, the quilting house, she helped me write that book. She's a quilter, and so she taught me how to quilt. And then in that story, I work in the steps to get through making a quilt. And she totally, basically wrote the steps for me to work from. And then for Kathy, my stepmother-in-law, she's a gardener. And so for the Garden Guild, I used a lot of her information. So we're so close, and I'm really grateful for that.
What's the best part of being an author, would you say?
Writing stories. I just love to write. I love to sit at my computer and make up stories about made up people. And then actually what's even better than that is hearing from readers that they liked what I write. I feel like Sally Fields sometimes when I read reviews. I'm always amazed that, oh my gosh, they read this whole book and they liked it and I wrote it. Wow, that's an incredible feeling.
So who has been your biggest supporter as you built your craft and career? It sounds like you've got a lot, but can you name one?
It would come down between my mom and my husband, and it'd be hard to pick, but I have to say my husband because he runs all of our marketing and advertising and financial business stuff. So he's doing half of the work with me. And so I feel like there's no greater support than someone who's willing to get up with me at 4:30 a.m., sit down, start making ads, analyzing ads, writing ad copy. So if you ever come across my books in Facebook ads or Amazon ads or BookBub ads, my husband Ed made those. So he
Wow,
knows
that's
sweet
awesome.
romance and women's fiction, which is fun for me, not for him maybe.
It's like a family business.
Yes, it
You know,
is. Mhm.
you all benefit. And so I don't have to tell you that it's harder than ever to get visibility for books nowadays. Was there ever a time that you were discouraged, and what do you do to get beyond that?
I was after the Summer Society came out because it was my longest book. It was almost 80,000 words. And I knew I was going in this mysterious women's fiction with a little bit of an edge. I knew I was doing something different, but I was pretty sure that it was a really good story. So when it wasn't as well received by my readers as Hickory Grove or Birch Harbor, I was worried. I was a little nervous. And then I just decided, you know what? I loved writing that book. I want to write more set in that town. So I'm just going to do it. And then I did, and I just got through. So I think just moving forward is the best answer. It was for me at that time. And then and then it ended up kind of turning around and I found my way with it.
I had
And
kind of a similar experience. I wrote a young adult supernatural novel. And at that point, I'd been writing women's fiction, and it just wasn't well received. It did okay. But now, years later, it's selling really well. And I don't know what the difference is, but like you, I didn't regret it. I enjoyed writing it, and I
Mhm.
thought it was a good story. And sometimes that's all you have to go on, you
Yes,
know?
you're right. If it's something you've enjoyed, then it's not a waste.
Okay, so we're always curious about what your why is when it comes to your fiction. What are you hoping your readers take from your books?
It would go back to, and this might change or evolve, but I do really hope that I'm communicating that it's okay in this fast-paced world to be happy with what you have to be happy at home, to feel contentedness. Because I think sometimes it's about the grind, or it's about the grass being greener, or leveling up, and I don't always agree with it. Of course, I like to set high goals for myself, right? I have high standards of my son, but I think there's a lot to be said for spending an afternoon sitting on your couch and reading a book, or working in your garden, or having family dinner. I think that's so critical to our well-being. And maybe it sounds, I don't know, glib or silly, but that's what I'd like to communicate in my stories. And I think that that's coming through.
Now, you had mentioned that you're working on a domestic suspense, which is a departure for you. Do you mind telling us about it, or is that something you're keeping under wraps?
Oh gosh, I thought before we started our recording today, I wondered, should I mention it? Should I not mention it? I am keeping it under wraps, but the title's under wraps. I'm kind of working with an agent on it, so I can't say a lot, but I can say that it has me up. Like, I am obsessed with this story. It's set in a country club, and it kind of examines the social structures in these privileged circles, and then when they kind of come into conflict with the average Joe type of family, my type of family, and how those sorts of relationships can work, or if they don't work. I don't know how. I won't say too much more. I can say that I'm really having fun with it, and it should be done. The book should be done this fall, and then we'll see where it goes. I love to read domestic thrillers and suspense. That's my favorite genre. I just devour anything and everything. Lisa Jewell.
I love her too. Yeah.
Liane Moriarty. Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I actually think it's one of the trickiest things, because as the story's unfolding, how much of a reveal do you do? I mean, you don't want to hold back too much or the reader will be frustrated, but if you give away too much, the twists and turns don't work. So I think once an author pulls it off, it's just a wonderful thing.
You're right. And that's something I've talked about with this gal I'm talking to. So in my Harbor Hills series, there's a bit of the domestic suspense. So it's set on a street where there's been a suspicious death and a couple of other things. And the relationships in the story on this street are kind of the difference between solving the mystery and not solving the mystery. But anyway, I realized, okay, I'm kind of sort of doing this when I so I write in the multiple POV. I have like 4 characters or 5 characters in most of my series. And so I've moved that into this new project. And I think that that's helping to address that exactly what you're talking about, Karen, where I can have a lot of questions up in the air, but I can still be answering a lot of things too, so that there's a satisfaction with each chapter just as a new question is raised.
Well, we have some fun extra questions we like to do at the end, and it's Karen's turn. So she's going to rattle those off for us.
Okay, this is our lightning round. Are you ready for this?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
What is one food that will never get past your lips?
Sushi.
Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Reese Witherspoon.
Oh, I can see that.
Yeah, that's
in my dreams.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Healing. Power to heal.
At the end of your life, what do you hope you'll have accomplished?
That I've raised my son to be successful and independent and happy.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
Bagger at Safeway.
How long did you do that?
A year and a half when I was in high school, and it just about destroyed my soul. And I love Safeway, actually. I do. I really love Safeway as a grocery store, but I just was struggling with the mindlessness of pushing in the cart sometimes, and I'm a worrier by nature. Long story short, it wasn't good for me to have a job where I wasn't doing a lot of thinking.
Okay, if you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Medicine.
What's your favorite scent?
Pumpkin.
What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
Nothing is coming to mind right now. Maybe giving birth. That was scary.
Yeah, that fits.
Okay.
When people mispronounce words, do you let them know?
Not usually, because my motto is good manners are more important than good grammar.
If you could live your life over again, would you want to?
No, I don't think so. I'm very happy with how things are rolling.
All right. Okay, you have, I think she's 10 for 10 on answers we've never heard before.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was fun. We often
Yay.
hear the same thing. But now I'm going to steal your healing one because that's definitely a great superpower.
Oh
yeah.
gosh. That just is derived from my obsessive compulsive disorder, and I just am a worrywart to the nth degree. So
You could be in my family. We've got some superstar warriors. Anyway, this was great fun. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I know with a little guy and writing so much, it's hard to find time. So we appreciate you.
And thank you too very much. This was such a fun interview. I appreciate your time too.
All right. Well, we will look forward to when it airs, and good luck with everything. And we'll hopefully get to have you back on sometime soon.
I would love that. Thank you both.
Okay. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comments section. This has been Behind the Book.